Okay, so just to get started, I'm just going to ask you like a basic question just so I can
Yep.
gauge to see how this is
Okay.
picking up your voice. So, when was the last time you went skiing?
Oh, about a month ago.
About a month
Just about
ago.
a month ago, yeah.
Yeah, how were the conditions this year?
Conditions were all right, but as we come down the mountain, we get to the bottom and the mountain was closed. They closed the mountain right there. Bang. All done. And my
Wow.
wife was skiing and says, "You're all done. You have to go home." And that was it. That was the end of skiing for the season.
Huh.
But we've been up there for 40 years
Wow.
at Sugarloaf.
Uh-huh.
Because when I was skating, I lived in Lake Placid, New York, and they wouldn't let me ski because they was scared we'd get hurt. They had too much money invested in us, and I never skied till I got out of the service, and I was like 40 years old when I started skiing or something like that. And
Huh.
so it was quite a time. Living in Lake Placid was kind of interesting, you know.
Yeah, well, we'll have a chance to
Yeah,
talk some more about that. So today is Friday, March 20th, 2020. My name is Nicole Morin Scribner. I'm the interviewer. And today I have the privilege of interviewing. Do you go by Dan or Danny or
doesn't matter.
Daniel?
Dan,
Okay, I have the privilege of interviewing Dan Gagne. And we are conducting this interview at his home in Biddeford, Maine. So I thank you for your willingness to share your story with us. And I usually start these interviews right at the beginning. Can you tell me when and where you were born?
yeah, was born right here in Biddeford, 1939, April 7th, and been here ever since, except for the years I was in the service. I lived in Lake Placid, New York, and I was in the Air Force, and I was on the Air Force skating team, and then I was on the Olympic training team in Lake Placid. So it was 4 years that we just lived there and did nothing but skate, and
Wow.
it was amazing. A lot of the people from all over the country were there, and top skaters, and it was very interesting. And
Well, maybe we can back up a little bit and figure out because you didn't go from being born in Biddeford to
no,
ending up doing that.
no,
So, were you born at home, at the
at
hospital?
Weber Hospital.
At Weber
Weber
Hospital.
Hospital in Bedford, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the first part of my life was kind of boring, like most kids, you know. And I think when I was 13, I started to skate. And I didn't have any skates. We were poor. And my father went down to Westbrook Skating Ring and he knew the people down there, Gus Lavaria and the Lavarias. And they let me use a pair of racing skates. So I thought it was pretty good, you know, just starting out. And the first year I just skated locally, and then uh, come out in the paper that they were going to have the Silver Skates Derby in the Boston Garden. So I said, "Oh, I'm going to enter that." So I entered it. My father brought me down, and I got in the race. I had these old skates that come from the rental department at Westbrook Skating Ring, and I had those on, and I got on the ice, and the first lap I fell. And that was the end of that season. Fell, and that was it. So the next year I sort of had a coach, a little coach, and his name was Henry Parody, and he was an old time skater and been skating for years and years, and one of the best skaters around. And he took me under his wing and started to teach me a little bit, and I learned that skates are very important. So I ordered a pair of skates through the Planet Company out of Canada, and ordered them, and it took me like 9 months to get them. And then after I got them, it was a big difference. And so we trained all year with the club that we had and all that stuff. And by then I was like 14, 14 or 15, and went down and competed in the junior division, and did very well. That year I won my division. The junior division was at age 15. So in that race, when you won a division, you couldn't race in it again. You had to move up to the next division. So that was in 1955, I believe. And then after that, I trained and trained, and the only races that we went to was at the Boston Garden because we didn't know of anything else. So we went there. And the second year, I was 16 years old, and I won the intermediate class, which was ages 17 and 18. And I won that division. So the following year, I was in the big race, the senior division, which was the highlight of the whole derby, and there was like 1,200 skaters there. So I entered that and started out, and I was sort of the favorite because I had been to different races. I was sort of the favorite, to win it. There was a lot of other good skaters, and I knew I had competition. So when the race started, the gun went off, and I took off and went one lap and fell. By the time I got up, I was lapped. So I started to go again. I caught up to the pack, and I fell again. They lapped me again. So I'm 2 laps behind in a 32-mile race. So I was just like in a zone. And I don't remember the crowd yelling, but the place was packed with, like 12,000, 14,000 people and yelling. And I couldn't hear anything. And I just went and skated and skated. And I went around, and I caught the pack again, and I went by them, and I lapped them and won the race. And that was that big trophy up there that I have. It was quite a thing. I was really into it at that point, and I started competing in other races all over the country, and we had our club. We had about over 100 kids in our skating club, just locally. And I taught them all how to skate and brought them to different meets, and a lot of them did very, very well. No, none of them ever won the Derby, though. But it was, at that time, the Derby was the biggest race around that we knew. And from there, we progressed and got to different races as we got to get to know people and get into the Northeastern Skating Association. And that got us so we could get a list of all the races and where they were and stuff like that. And that's how we sort of got into the national scene. So from there, it got better. And when I was 18, I went to the service. And instead of getting a job, I was put on the base training team, which developed into the Air Force training team. So from there, we got our expenses paid. That was the big thing because we were poor. Being from around here, and my father worked in a mill, and we was poor. So getting that to make me progress faster, they paid our expenses. We went to the meet, and all we had to do was go to the meet, get a room, keep the receipt from the whole motel, the hotel where we stayed, and our eating expenses. And then we get back to the base, we would go to payroll section and give them to them, and they would reimburse us. So when I first started out, I had a 1958 Ford Fairlane convertible, and I would go to the meets in that. And many times I would go to the meet, this was before I was the Air Force, couldn't afford to stay in a hotel, so I used to sleep in the car. Of course, that didn't help any because by the time you got to the race, you're kind of cold and no place to get warm. Because in those days, the outdoor rinks were on a lake, and the wind howling past you, and you're trying to keep warm. And luckily, after I got into the service, I got a high altitude suit. I still have the jacket, I think. Big fur hood, big jackets, and big pants. And with that, you could keep warm. Just go to the beach and just lay in the snowbank and rest. So it was pretty interesting, to get around and have your expenses paid compared to paying it out of your pocket. So, like a couple of times I went out west to Minnesota in my car, slept in my car, then competed. It wasn't easy, but as you progress in any sport or any field, you get a lot of knowledge, and after you develop the knowledge of how other people do it, then it become a lot easier. Because then I started going to meets with people from Massachusetts, and this made it so much easier to be able to go with people that knew what they were doing. So that was a big thing then, and probably still a big thing nowadays to compete at that level. It was quite a thing, you know. I was pretty honored and winning a lot of races, you know. And when you went to these meets, even though you were the favorite, you didn't win every race. The champion of the particular race had to race in many different distances, and you would get points. If you won say the 220-yard race, you would get 10 points. And for that race, then you ran a half mile and then a mile and then a 2 mile, so you get points for each one. And that's how they determined who was the champion of that meet, and made it interesting and a little tougher to just go out and win one race and you was a champ. But over these races, you had to go through the process to become the champ, like they do nowadays, I believe. But nowadays it's a little different. They got so much technology and stuff. We didn't have anything. I think I got one film of me skating, was done by an 8mm camera, black and white. No color then. Everything was black and white. So, and our uniforms were dark and white. We had a white V on the front with a patch on it that said the Maine Blazeman Skating Club. And I went with Henry Parody, who was my coach. We went to Massachusetts to try to have some uniforms made for our skating club. We was gone 3 days before we found a place. We got lost. We drove 100 miles out of our way. It was something else, but he was a great guy. And finally we found a place that made our uniforms, and we used to race in our, when we first started, we started to get into it a little bit. We didn't have any uniforms, and everybody else had uniforms. So what we did is we took long underwear and we dyed it, and that's what we wore. And we went down there with people looking at us and go like, "Well, what's wrong with these guys?" But that's all we had. But then we learned, you know, as you progress, and we had a lot of people help us, a lot of nice people that was into skating, you know, like Roland Hodge and Fern Gobeg. The Gobiel family was a big family of skaters, and all ages. The Gobegs and the Florence oil fuel, those guys, they were all big skaters, real skaters. And when I started, they was the cream of the crop. And the first year, of course, I didn't beat them. The second year, I didn't beat them. But the third year, I was a little closer. Then after that, I'd never lost a race in this state in my life after that point, which was pretty good, you know. I thought, anyways. There was a lot of people, a lot of people that skated. It's unbelievable how far it went into the city and the state too, because we had people skating from South Paris that skated with us and stuff like that. So it developed into quite a thing that I never thought it would develop into. I mean, we went from having 4 or 5 kids practicing with us to like 70, 80, 100 at that one time we had in our club. Of course, they weren't all real speed skaters, but they liked it and they got into it. And but what we did is we only had, I think it was, 16 uniforms. So we picked out the top 16 skaters, and they got a uniform. And as people grow up and they would beat these people, then it would take their uniform from them and give it to the people that beat them. So it's sort of a prestige thing, you know, where people got the suits, so give them something to work to. So luckily I never lost my suit. So.
Now, do you know how, like, what the history of speed skating, why speed skating in Biddeford, when it got started, or?
Well, it was the main reason was the Silver Skates Derby. That's all we knew from around here, and the Florence and the Gubbags and those people were skaters before I started skating, and they used to have just local races at Westbrook Skating Rink, and that's pretty much how everybody got started, was down there. And they had every Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock, they'd clear the rink, and there'd probably be 1,000 people skating on the ice, and everybody just got to decide. They set the track up, and we'd go out and race around, and it was pretty good. And a lot of people get interested just from that, and from there you progress through the years, so it's quite a thing. It was quite a thing at the time.
Now, the Maine Bladesmen, what can you tell me about that organization? Had it been in existence for a long time?
No, I started it.
Oh.
There was no organization, no organized teams or anything like that. And I started that club with Henry Parody, and he's since deceased. Started with him, and it just grew from there. But no, there was no organized racing or anything like that. Just they'd set a track up and go around, and the winner, there you go, and that was it. And they used to give us little medals like this when I first started. Now the medals are like this, I have medals from the North Americans and the Nationals and stuff like that hanging over there. And it just blossomed from there. And it was one of the best times of my life. This is skating. I met so many nice people and so many nice competitors and their families and stuff like that. And the first time that I took a group out of state, we went to Boston, Massachusetts. I think it was Wilmington, Mass. And that was the first place that anybody had ever competed. From there, we progressed to different races, and we took one group to Lake Placid, New York, to the Nationals. And they did fairly well, but nobody won any medals or anything like that. I won 3 medals that year. They weren't first place medals, they were second and third, but they were medals. To me, that was a big deal, But it was good. We have a lot of people that still remember it. And everybody you talk to that remembers skating, they always remember the people that used to skate. And a lot of them live close by, and I see them now and then, and we talk about skating and stuff like that. But it's nice to talk old times with people that used to participate in that. So it was good.
Now, I'm trying to figure out when you first started skating, because there were other activities, that this town has a history of in terms of sports. And so was it, because a lot of the other sports, it's competition like from high school to high school.
Right.
But there was no it's not like Biddeford versus St. Louis on this.
No, it was just local skaters, and people from out of town used to come down for the races and stuff like that. But no, it was pretty much local when we first started. Mm-hmm. And it just grew. So.
Now, what you mentioned from, what did you say, Paris or South
Paris,
yeah. Because were there other communities where speed skating was a big deal?
There were a few towns. Lewiston had a few, and Upper Maine had a few. South Paris and Norway, a couple other places had 1 or 2 skaters, but that was it. In fact, we went to Lewiston. Before the ice froze over here, as we got into it, we learned we had to start skating before the ice froze. So we used to go to Lewiston, to the ice arena in Lewiston, and Lewiston was strictly a hockey town. And we couldn't afford to rent the ice, so we just skated in public sessions. And after 3 or 4 times, we had to stop going because the hockey players didn't like us speed skating on their ice. And they used to check us into we were going around in 2, 3 guys together. And they'd come cut right in front of us and push us into the boards. And so we had to stop that. It just wasn't working out. So then from there we started going to Lynn, Mass. They had public sessions over there, and we would go over there and skate. And then they started to have speed skating sessions in Worcester, Mass. And we would go down there twice a week. It would take us 2.5 hours to go down there, 2.5 hours to come back for an hour and a half skating session. So, you had to be pretty dedicated to be a speed skater at that time.
Now, how'd you get there?
By car. By then I had my license, and I drove kids down, piled 7, 8 kids in the car, Of course, you got to figure that I was one of the older ones, and a lot of the kids were like 12, 13, 14, so that wasn't very big. So you could put 4 or 5 in the back seat, and 3, 4 in the front seat, go down, drive all the way down. And when we first started going to Massachusetts, it was before the turnpike was there. So we had to go down Route 1. And go from here to Boston was like a 3-hour trip. Now you're doing an hour and 15, 20 minutes. It was a long trip. But that was nice, being with everybody in the car and talking about what you did all day.
Now, this was winter.
Yeah, in the winter, yeah.
So, driving, not the highway, that many young people in the car, and it's winter. I bet you had some interesting rides.
Oh, yeah. I never forget the one ride. Emo Lamontagne, the Lamontagne family, he had a plumbing business, and I worked for him. And he had a Cadillac, and I had an old Cadillac, and we went to New York skating, and we got there, and we had a snowstorm of like 2.5 to 3 feet. You couldn't, the state police was, stay off the road, stay off the road. Well, here we are, we had all these kids with us, so we're going to try and make it home. So we left New York. It took us 8 hours to drive from New York to here. And when we got here, the roads weren't plowed. We got to 5 Points in Biddeford, and that's when there was a Gulf station and a Shell station. And we just got there and just plowed right into their parking area, and just could get in so far and bury the car. Got out of the car and walked home with our bags over our back. It was a long, long trip. Non-stop, 8 hours of driving to go a couple hundred miles. So
Now, you would have been like around how old at that point? Was that?
at that point, I was probably 18, 19, something like that, yeah. Around there, 19. So it was a long time ago.
Now, and people were okay with you bringing, their younger children to
Yeah. Well, that was
these
before.
trips?
Nowadays, they probably wouldn't allow you or want you to do that. But in those days, it wasn't like it is now. You didn't have these pedophiles and all these people molesting children. You didn't think of that in those days, We had some kids that were really young, like Carol Lamontagne. She was, 7, 8 years old. She was the best girl skater around. Take her with us. She did very well out there.
Well, that's one of the questions I was going to ask you. So, women were encouraged to participate in that sport as much as the guys?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely, yeah. There was no what you call prejudice then as women against men and stuff like that. We just accepted anybody that wanted to skate, anybody. And the skating ring used to let our skating club in at half price. So if kids all wanted to get in the club so they could skate for half price. They did, and it worked out fine because it made them interested in skating. Mm-hmm. But by then, we knew what had to be done, what kind of skates you needed and all that stuff. But when I started, there was none of that. But Westboro Skating Ring, if you wore a pair of figure skates, you were out of place. Because everybody wore speed skates. Everybody. All kinds. I mean, old people, young people, starting out, everybody had races. Now, if you went down there, you wouldn't even see a pair of races at all. So.
Yep. So, because, you know, this is a French Canadian community, and when you think of skating, you think of hockey.
Yeah.
You know, that's why part of the question is, where does speed skating come from, you know?
Well, there were a few people that were speed skaters when I started, and they had been skating for quite a few years, and they just started with them. I mean, they were there, and as we got a group together, they decided to. They used to have a hockey ring out back of the Westwood Canyon rink, way out back, went down to the side. There used to be a hockey ring out there, and the hockey players would go there, and the other people would skate in the rest of the place. And then after we got so many people involved in speed skating, they eliminated the hockey rink. And most of the hockey rinks were people from the Catholic schools. The brothers and priests used to come up there. They used to play hockey. And we used to sit there and watch them, you know, on the boards. But that all went away once we took over. And everybody in the place had speed skates. Nobody had hockey skates. They wouldn't even allow hockey players on the ice because it was dangerous, you know. And at that time, I don't know if you remember it or not, there was another skating ring across the street, the Silver Skating Ring. And it was run by, I can't remember his name, but he was, used to have baseball. He was really into baseball. And he had baseball teams, and that's where they used to meet. And in the summer, they had a baseball field over there. And in the winter, they would flood it. But nobody ever went there because they didn't have any music, you know. You probably remember the great big box they had up there with the speakers and blaring away. It was quite a thing then. It really was.
Now, was St. Louis Skating Rink operating at that time?
No. We went from there, and his name was Chick Cody. He lived right here on West Street. And he started the St. Louis skating rink by himself with a garden hose. Started out small, and then within a few years it was big, you know, and then they turned the football locker room into a warm-up place for the skaters who used to go in there and get warm. Because in those days we didn't have the clothing that we have nowadays. I mean, you can buy a sweater now, and that's one of my skiing sweaters, and we didn't have that years ago. We used to raise, our uniforms were made out of 100% wool, knitted, so the wind would go right through it. So it was cold.
So when you first started skating, like you said, I think you were 13 or 14,
Yeah.
What would you wear to go skating then?
Jeans. Just jeans. No long underwear, just jeans and a jacket and a pull-down hat and a pair of gloves and mittens. That was it. So we went through a lot of hard times, but it got better as the years went on. We got a little more educated.
Now, where were you able to buy skates at the very beginning?
Out of Canada. Used to write in to the company, and they would mail you an envelope with all the instructions, and they were custom skates, and they had a thing you unfolded, and you put your foot on the floor, you traced your foot, and you took measurements, and then you mailed it in, and they would make the skates to fit your foot. And at that time, the only thing we knew about was outdoor skating, so we got outdoor skates. But then when we started skating indoors, we realized we didn't have the right kind of skates. So there are 3 different kinds of skates. There are the regular speed skates with what they call a low cup of maybe 1.5 inches. So that when you skated, your blade was like that, and the cup was so like that, your boot would hit the ice, and your blade would come off the ice, and down you'd go. And then they went into the Olympic-style skates, which was probably a 3-inch cup, which was higher so you could turn. And then they come out with the indoor skates, where the skate, instead of the blade being in the center, it was to the side. And you always race left to right. So this blade was over here, so that when you turn, you could go like that, and you wouldn't hit your boot. It wouldn't go down. So stuff you learn as you go along, you know. And then I think the first pair of skates I bought, I think I paid about $150 for them. Now the skates are like $1,000. But now they come out with a new type of skate, which is called a clapper skate, where the heel disconnects from the shoe. So when you push, you bring your foot up, the blade stays on the ice. So that made a big difference. Big difference, yeah. That's all they wear nowadays, even in the Olympics. So.
Now, somebody said, like this was probably before your time, that the speed skating started out like on the rivers in Biddeford. Do you know anything about that, or
Nope.
had you ever
I
heard
never-
anybody
Nope.
talk about it?
No, I started, well, it's been 60, 70 years since I've been skating, and I don't remember them skating on the river. I don't. They probably did before they had the Westbrook skating ring and different rinks.
Now, do you know who started the Westbrook skating rink itself?
Yes, Laveria's. They lived on where the parking lot is up top of the skating rink. Way down the end, there's the building on the right. It's a concrete building. They lived there. And the guy was a contractor, one of the guys, Gus Laveria. And his father is the one that started it. And they had something to scrape the ice. They had a small dump truck, and they would put this rig on the front of it. And the rig was about 8 or 10 feet long and had a scoop inside. And they would push it up over the bank and back up and back and forth. And that's how they clean the ice then. So, and what they used to do when they got a small storm, we used to go down and they used to pay us 25 cents an hour to shovel ice. So we'd go out there, 10, 15 kids, and clean the rink, and we'd make a couple of dollars, which was a lot at that time, And I'll never forget the time that I did the ice in Gus Laveria. He had a reputation around town to be a little shrewd. And he was, I guess. And I went down and I worked there, 3 hours, cleaned the ice, and didn't pay us. So my father was a boxer. He went, "Come with me." Took us down there, went down there and saw Gus Laveria, and he grabbed him by the throat. "You're going to pay my son or I'm going to have to knock your block off." Okay. So he paid me. But I didn't do that again. I said, "Not going to pay me, I'm not going to do it." Because it was cold. We didn't have the stuff that we had now, So freeze your hands and your
Now,
ears.
how could you afford to take those trips and once you got into this?
All out of your own pocket. Even for the club, we had the club would pay. The only thing we could afford to pay when people that wanted to go out of state and skate was the gas. That was it. And besides that, you had to pay everything yourself. Your parents paid it, the room and your meals and stuff like that. So that wasn't a large group when we used to go out. Maybe, sometimes it'd be 2 cars full of kids, maybe 10, 12 people. But not large groups, so it wasn't too bad.
So I'm going to back up a little bit. You were just talking about your parents. Can you tell me a little bit about your dad?
My dad moved down from Quebec, Canada.
Do you know where in Quebec?
I don't. I think it was Quebec City, if I remember right. And moved down here, and he started working at the shipyard in Portland, and then he transferred over to Biddeford, and then he started working at Sokolova shops. And my grandfather, his name was John Leahy, was the foreman of the foundry. So that's got my father into the foundry, and he started working in there, and he worked his way up a little bit. But he was a real French Canadian. In fact, his English, right up to the day he died, was, "You go downstairs, you." That's the way he spoke, And my mother was from Graminan Island. She was a pure Irishman. Her name was Leahy. And she moved down here and when they was 8 or 9 with her family. Met my father and they got married. They had 4 kids. We had, I had 2 brothers, myself and my sister. And in those days, that was a small family. Because there were families in those days of people that had 10. I had an aunt that had 15 kids. You would never do that nowadays. But times have changed so much.
So with a very, very, very French Canadian father and with an Irish mother, What was home like? What language did you speak?
My mother never spoke a word of French in her whole life. We always spoke English. And when I was young, first born, I don't know, less than a year old, my mother got really, really ill. And she spent like 8, 9 months in the hospital and a year at home. And we couldn't stay with my mother, so I lived with my grandmother, who only spoke French. So by the time I got back, that was 2 or 3 years later, I got to go back home with my folks. I couldn't speak any English. I only spoke French. And to this day, I don't speak it, but I understand it. And I think the reason I don't speak it is because they used to make fun of you if you spoke with a French accent and stuff like that. So we never spoke French. None of my brothers or sisters ever spoke French either. None of them.
What were the traditions at your home? Any French cultural traditions, or primarily Irish, or?
I think it was my mother did all the cooking, and so it was pretty much Irish food. A lot of different things she used to make. In fact, in those days we had a kerosene stove. I don't know if you're familiar with that. 2 burners, and then the oven. And in the back of the oven was a spot about 2 feet by foot. You fill it full of water, and that's where you get your hot water out of. And we used to take a bath, and my mother had to heat it up, take a pan and rinse us off with hot water, and that was our hot water. So it was quite a time. And the food that we ate was mostly Irish, because my mother was Irish. You know, boiled dinners and stuff like that. Mostly Irish.
Did you have any connections with the Canadian relatives?
No, not really. Being where my mother was Irish, didn't speak French. My father's side all spoke just French. My mother's father and family lived in Biddeford. They were scattered out, and some of them moved away. One of them was a fisherman, and he used to go on these fishing trips out in the ocean, and for years and years and years. But they were all alcoholics. And he ended up going out to sea, and when he was drunk, fell overboard, drowned. Then I had another uncle who was always in jail. Not speaking too well of my family, but like I said, there was all alcoholics. So wasn't my grandfather. I remember going to his house. Always had a quart of Ballantine ale right next to the green bottles. All day, that's all he did, sit there and drink, unless he was working. He didn't drink when he worked, but when he was home, that was it. So.
Now, what neighborhood did you grow up in?
I grew up in Biddeford off of Granite Street on Cody's Circle. It's the first, you know where the fork in the road is, where Granite Street and Hill Street meet? It's the first street that ties them together. Right by where the big rocks are, that's the area we grew up in. And the neighbor across the street was a good friend of my mother's. She was Irish. Her name was O'Leary. And she was my mother's best friend. My mother didn't have any friends, really, because she wasn't the type of person who would make friends. But they would go out to the movies. Her, my aunt, and Mrs. O'Leary, 3 of them would go to the movies every Wednesday. That's what they did. They'd go out, go to a movie, then they'd go out, have a little bite to eat, then they'd come home. That would be it for them. They wouldn't go out again.
And as a kid, did you play with the neighborhood kids?
Yeah. Well, we played with the neighborhood kids, and our little group was Irish-like, and the other groups around the neighborhood were French, little cliques, like maybe 8 or 10 kids, and we didn't get along. You know, we had this one kid. He was a big kid, and we'd go by him, and he would see him, would turn around and run the other way because he'd beat us up. So most of the neighborhood was pretty good, our local neighborhood. We had football teams, and we used to play football at Emory School when it was dirt. It wasn't tarred then. And the 2 end zones was the road on both sides. That was the end zone. So I'll never forget my brother. There was a post there. My brother was 2 years younger than I was, and he was kind of frail. Like, I give him the ball. He put his head down, right smack into a pole, knocked him out cold. And we used to have league. We used to play teams from different parts of the city. You know, small kids, 10, 12, 15 years old. And the guy that had the store across the street, and it's still there, it used to be an IGA then, used to be called Pepin's Market on the corner. And we used to play, and he used to give the winners, the team that won, the whole team, he would give them a soda and a pastry. That was what we used to play for. I know he was a nice guy, you know, but he's...
So what schools did you go to in Biddeford?
When I first started going to school, I went to St. Mary's School down on St. Mary's Street, right behind where the Dunkin' Donuts is. In fact, the school used to sit where Dunkin' Donuts was. And that's where we went to school. The first 2 years I went to school, I was 5 years old. Then you had to be 5 years old to go to school. And the first year I went to school, we went down with we walked. There was no buses then. We walked from Granite Street to St. Mary's School, 5 years old with my brothers. He was 2 years older than I was. And snow, it didn't matter. And I never forget one year, we was playing in our front yard, and we had those days, they still have them nowadays, the water shut off stops. It used to stick about this by about the ground. And I was standing there, and my brother jumped on my back, and he broke my leg, broke my ankle. And I still had to go to school in a cast. So then my brother used to bring me to school in a wagon, in a cast to go to school. You wouldn't do that nowadays, because nowadays kids don't walk 100 yards, they take the bus. Not in those days. In those days, there was no bus. There was a bus, but only for people that lived a mile and a half out of town. That was it.
So obviously you must have gotten good care because your ankle didn't get in the way of your sports.
No. Well, I've had many mishaps. I used to race bikes, street bikes. And I get picked off by a car on Prospect Street after a training run. And I saw this guy coming down the road, and he's drifting towards my side. And he sees me. And, well, he didn't see me. He come right at me, and I was either hit the curb or try to go around him. So I tried to go around him, and when I turned the bike sideways, it was dirt, and I slid. I went right on the car and broke this leg from here to here in 9 places. I was a year and a half in a body cast, and that was years ago. I don't know. I got a pin that was in my leg about this long, diamond shape with a thread on it, and that kept the bones together because they kept trying to reset it and they wouldn't take it. They'd break it again and reset it, and that was Dr. Mahaney. And finally, there's nothing we can do, so they put a pin inside of it, and I had it in there for 2 years. And then they decided they were going to remove it. So it had threads on the end. And how they removed it was they drilled a hole over here and went inside with a rod, screwed it on the tip of that thing, and pulled it right out. And that was it. From then on, I didn't have anything in there.
Now, how old were you when that happened?
Oh, let's see. I was probably 19. Let's see. Yeah, 19.
So you had that during...
Yeah, while I was skating, I had it. Yeah. Also, I used to race snowmobiles. And going 90 miles an hour, I left the trail and hit a tree and broke my leg right here. I'm laying down, face down in the snow, and my leg was up next to my head. And I'm saying, it didn't knock me out, but I was sort of dizzy. And I looked down and I saw a foot next to my face. I said, somebody else crashed with me. Well, nobody crashed with me. It was my own leg. So I'm 3 miles into the woods, and they had to get me out of the woods, and that was really painful. They had to take my leg and push it down and put me on a sled, and they dragged me out, put me in an ambulance, took me to the hospital.
Now, was that after your skating days?
Yes, after my skating days.
Huh.
That's when I used to race snowmobiles and bikes and stuff like that. So I was always a little, I want to say crazy, but not crazy, but really adventurous. You know, it's like even with skating, I got into skating for like 18, 20 years, And then I moved on from that to something else, and moved on from that to something else. Always 8 or 10 years, and then time to move on. Like racquetball. I mean, I was probably one of the best racquetball players in the state. In fact, I was the club pro over in Saco. And I won, I think it was 18 state titles in racquetball. So that was a big thing then. I played in Dallas, Texas, and Virginia, and different places where they had the nationals and stuff like that. So it was an exciting thing to do. A fast game. I like speed and fast things that move fast. Like bike racing and speed skating and different things. Always speed. So I never skied in my life because I couldn't. They wouldn't let me. So once I started skiing, I says, I'm going to take up skiing. This is one sport I'm not going to race in. And I never did. Been skiing 40 years and never raced. Although I ski fast. Real fast.
So I think back to you going to St. Mary's School. What was sitting in a classroom like for you all day?
We had nuns, of course. We had desks. And in those days, you didn't change rooms. Just one room, and you stayed there. And we had desks, old desks and little chairs. And the desks were open in the front. And you slid your stuff in there. And then I think the next year we had desks that flipped up. And that was your homeroom, so you kept everything in your desk. And in those days, you didn't have homework. You just went to school, and you went home, played, and you went back to school, and that was it. So, but things changed after a while. Went from there, I went to Emory School in the 4th grade. And I went to Emory School, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. And then when I was in the 6th grade, we also had 7th and 8th grade at Emory School. But just so happened when I got ready into the 6th grade, go into the 7th grade, they transferred the junior high school over to Biddeford High School on the 1st floor. So we moved over to there. But we had manual training, which was taught by a Mr. Caldwell, who was the principal of the school. And it was what they called general dynamics or something like that. Anyways, manual training is what it was. And we walked from the junior high over to the Emory School to take classes. And we used to build things. And we always you had to walk in a group, single file with one adult to get over there. And they taught us how to build things. Like the first thing I ever built was a candle holder. The old-fashioned candle holders that ring, and then the back shield with a handle in the back with a thing in front. And you that's what you used for light, They didn't have flashlights those days. Nobody had flashlights, but that was quite a thing. We did different things like that for 2 years. And then you got into high school, and it was a different story once you got in high school.
So you were at Biddeford High.
Biddeford High, yeah. Graduated from Biddeford High in 1957.
Now back then, maybe skating made a difference because the city has a history of, rivalry among schools. Yeah. Where it was rivalry among schools existed?
We had no rivalry in speed skating. It was
no rivalry in speed skating.
Strictly individual thing. Whether it was from St. Louis or Thornton or... Then, in those days, we had St. Francis High School, private school. And they only had kids from out of state and kids that were in trouble. And that's what we had, St. Francis High School. And we played them in football. The first year we played them in football. And we beat them. We killed them. But then it went from St. Francis High School to St. Francis College. And in fact, I did the first laboratory they had out there when I was working for Lamontagne. I think I was 20 years old or something like that. And did the first thing, and it was all glass piping and lead piping and stuff like that. And wasn't many kids there. They probably had a couple hundred kids. That was it. Now they got into the thousands. I mean, thinking back when I was a kid and how it progressed to like a couple hundred kids to thousands of kids, it's unbelievable. I go down there and I goes, because I ride bike down around there all the time, and I go, can't believe it. This used to be a high school. One building, that's all I had. One building. So it was interesting to see the times change and people change and things change.
So when you were in high school, did you have any part-time jobs?
Yes. I was a junior in high school, and I don't know if you probably remember the Trumulus Market on the corner of Pool Road where the credit union is. Well, underneath the market, there was a bowling alley. Had 6 lanes, and I ran that for a couple of years while going to school. Worked for a guy by the name of Darian, yeah. Worked for him. Just run it. And in those days, we just had pin boys. There was no automatic sets. We had pin boys sitting in the middle of 2 aisles, and pins are flying there, dodging around. it was interesting. I did that till I was a senior. And once I got done school, I worked on the beach for a year. Then I went into service. In the service 4 years.
Now, what did your parents think about you? You obviously spent quite a bit of time on the speed skate.
Yep.
What did your? Let me ask you this: did your parents have hobbies?
No. My father was a boxer, but he had no hobbies. His hobby was drinking. And my mother, in my whole life, never even saw me skate once. She didn't drive. And by then, my father and mother didn't get along too well, but they stayed together because of the kids, so she never ever saw me skate once. My father saw me skate. He used to go down and watch me skate, and he'd stand up top in front of his car, and they used to park, and race is done, this guy go home. That was it. Never said good skating and all that stuff. So the only time I ever saw him on the ice is we used to do barrel jumping. And we had this thing where we would line barrels up, quite a ways. And I started jump forwards and land backwards. It was quite a thing then. And my brother did that and it almost killed him. Jumped over, did his turn, hit the last barrel, went back in his head, knocked him out cold. He didn't know who or where he was for 2 days. That was the only time I saw my father come down on the ice, come down to see how he was. We took him to the hospital. He was all right. He had a concussion, and I don't think he's ever been the same since. But he was only like 13, I guess, or something like that. So a lot of things happened down at that Westbrook skating rink. You see it nowadays and say, well, it's not the same place it used to be. The place's buildings run down. They don't even cut the grass or anything like that. So.
What's your favorite memory from Westbrook skating rink when you were a kid?
I don't know. I think my favorite part was the training sessions. When we used to have, 25, 30 kids on the ice skating around. Of course, they were all trying to keep up with me, so I used to pace them around the track. And we used to skate 7 nights a week. Every night we was there for 2-3 hours. The only time we didn't skate if big snowstorm and we had to wait for the ice to get cleared, so that was the only time that we didn't skate. Every day. We used to go down Sunday. They opened at 12 o'clock on Sunday. We'd get there at 11 and skate right up till 7 o'clock at night. And in those days, inside, they didn't have heat in the building. They had a wood stove. And I don't know if you remember that or not. They used to pile the wood under the benches all the way around. It was all wood. And they used to feed the wood stove. And you sit there with your feet up by the stove to get warm. And then once you got warm, somebody, come on, my turn. And you'd have to move out, let somebody else sit by the stove to get warm. So.
If you were there that long, how'd you eat?
We used to make sandwiches. Or we used to save 20 cents and buy a hot dog. No drink, so we couldn't afford a drink. So a hot dog was what we ate all day.
Mm-hmm. What was, in high school, what was dating like or going out?
Well, being in the sports so much, I didn't do too much dating. Of course, I had a girlfriend and all that stuff. I had one girlfriend that used to live down by the skating rink, and we were pretty good friends for a couple of years. And then come summer, I got a job, and I didn't see her again. And then I met my first wife. She was skating a little bit, and went out with her for a few years. When I went to service, we got separated. So then when I come back, we got back together and we got married. We was married for 13 years, and she was a very, very religious person. I don't have anything against religion, but to the point was church almost every day, Good Friday, Lent, this, that. It just drove me nuts. So I couldn't take it anymore. I was too active. I just couldn't spend my time sitting in church. I mean, I'm a Catholic and I believe in God and all that stuff, but it was just too much for me. So we split up.
So going back to you're going to the service, was that because did you volunteer for the service, or?
When I went in the service, you had a choice. Either you enlisted or you get drafted. And if you get drafted, you went into the Army. So if you enlisted, you got your pick. So I enlisted and I joined the Air Force. Simply because of the fact I didn't want to go overseas. You know, and I didn't want to live in tents. And in the Air Force, you had barracks and stuff like that. So a mess hall. The mess hall was open 24 hours a day. I used to come home on weekends and get back to the base at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and go over and eat 3 o'clock in the morning. And I used to have this one dish. Everybody loved it. And it was called SOS. And you probably know what it is. A toast and the creamy stuff with peas and carrots. Put on it. We call it SOS. We used to call it shit on the shingles. On toast. And that was what we did the service, is eating in the mess hall. That's all we did. But when I lived in Lake Placid, I was on Lake Placid for 8 months a year. And then besides that, I was on the base. When we were in Lake Placid, we ate in restaurants because we get reimbursed. So that was a good deal.
So where did you go for basic training?
Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. I was there for 3 months, and then I was sent to school, electronics school, and went to electronics squadron, but never did any electronics. I just skated all it. That's what I did.
So did you, after you got out of high school, did you think of going to college, or?
Well, no, in those days, not everybody went to college. I'm sorry.
No.
Not everybody went to college. No, I didn't. I thought about it, but couldn't afford it. Because I got married when I was in the service. The last year was in the service, so got married. We had 1 kid, so I had to go to work. And when I got out of the service, there was no work around. None at all. I ended up going to work at Allied Shoe Company over in Saukle. I worked there for, 2 months doing vulcanizing. And vulcanizing is where they put the rubber sole onto the sneaker, and it was a hot foot, real red hot. And then you put the sneaker on it, and then you put the sole on it, and you would hook it up with little hooks on the side, pull it down, then you hit a button, what you need, hit the button, and it would go, and would vulcanize the sole right to the sneaker. And that's what we did. And I didn't last that long because I had burns all over my hand, stuff like that. And from there I went to work over to Marmont. Then it was called Saukle, and I worked there for a little less than a year. And I was teaching skating, and come in one day and they go, everybody's done. The whole department's laid off. What do I do now? Got a kid. And so luckily, teaching the kids, Emil Lontang had his own business, had 5, 6 guys working for him, and he says, Dan, he says, I can give you a job so you can get through this tough time you're going through, and but it's only temporary. I want to let you know it's only temporary. Anything, anything. So I took the job. I worked for him for 2 months, and I worked with him. And after 2 months, he goes, you know what? You're hired full time. I'm not going to let you go. So I started with him, and after 4 or 5 years, he would go on trips to Europe and stuff, and I would run the company while I was gone. So he was a good guy, and he got me into the plumbing business, and I thank him, and I'll never forget him. He was a great guy. And to this day, I'm friends with his Paul Lamontagne, who just got inducted into the Snowmobile Hall of Fame. He used to race snowmobiles. I used to race with him. And Carol Lamontagne, who was a super athlete at Biddeford High School, she was indoctrinated into the Historic Society. And Diane Lamontagne, who lives way up in Maine. She married a guy from Maine, school teacher. She's been up there all these years. But they still live in the same house. Except for Diane, she lives up north. Carol lives in the house. Paul lives in the house. And her brother John, who runs the business now. But he works alone. In those days, Emil had 4 trucks. That was a big business then. So, but he's still there. He's the only one doing plumbing in the whole family. Paul didn't want to do plumbing. I don't like to get my hands dirty. So his father bought an oil truck. And Paul started driving an oil truck, and to this day, he's still delivering oil. He works for Champagne. Delivers oil over here. In fact, we're just going to change oil companies. After being with him 50 years or more, we're going to change companies this month, because my son works for Jim Gubbo. He works there, and his wife works there. And being a family member, we get $1 off a gallon. So naturally, I'm going to change. It's a big chunk of change every time.
And then you decided to go into your own
Yep.
business.
Yep. Well, first I went into the Plumbers and Steamfitters Union in Portland, Local 217. And I was a pipe fitter, and then I became a welder, and I was doing both. And I worked in Maine Yankee, nuclear plant. I worked there for 4 or 5 years and did real delicate work, stainless steel pipes, welding, heliac welding and stuff like that. And then from there, I went in business for myself for a few years, and then I went to Seabrook Power Plant and worked there for a couple of years. And it's crazy. They wanted you to work 7 days a week, and so I quit that and went in business for myself, and I've been in business ever since. So, but at one time, I had 6 guys working for me. But through the years, I found out that, you know what? I spend all my time running after work, running after them, fixing their screw-ups for about, I did that for maybe 7, 8 years now. This is crazy. So when times got tough again, I laid them off, and I kept one guy. His name is Bill Deneen, married to my daughter. She's a school teacher at Biddeford High. She teaches seniors. And he worked for Jim Gudbo. And I kept him, just him and I, for I don't know how many years. Then I got to a point where there was no work around, so I says, Bill, if you can find another job, find another job. So he did. He went to work for somebody down the Old Orchard, and then he went from there to somebody else, and then to Jim Gubbo. So he's been with Jim Gubbo for 15, 20 years. Super nice kid. Real nice guy.
Now, when you work in a business like that, you get to see a lot of the community, and any interesting insights of
Yeah, it kind of amazed me to get into some of these homes to see how these people live. You wouldn't believe some of the rat holes I was in. And people living in there with kids. Food on the floor, they never make their beds, a pile of clothes on the floor, the kitchen sink's full of dishes and dirty. And I thought, oh, how can these people live this way? And then you get to go into all these businesses, and that was sort of a different type of work, but still a business. They only wanted, in those days, they only wanted to fix the little problem they had. They wasn't looking at an advance. Well, in 5 years we're going to have to replace this. It was just patch it. And I can remember working at White Star Laundry, and their boiler went, and we worked 3 straight days without stopping, redoing the boiler over so they could get back into business. 3 straight days without sleeping. We'd take a little nap, maybe half an hour, back to work. Didn't eat, work, and they used to bring us in a hamburger or something just to get it back online. I think it was who was that owned by? Oh, I can't remember his name anyway. My mind's not what it used to be. But I remember quite a bit. My worst thing is names, people's names.
Mm-hmm.
That's the worst thing. So.
And did you see some changes, like with what impact did it have on your business with like the changes in the economy in Biddeford?
Well, of course, there's ups and downs, times where people don't do anything, and like I said, fix this, just fix that, that's it. To nowadays where you go in and have a problem with the heating system and just change it, put a new system in. That's a big change from years ago. And also the materials have changed. When I first started plumbing, we was running galvanized pipe and lead pipe and stuff like that. Nowadays, everything's plastic and PEX pipe, and it's not even the same feel whatsoever. My son's a plumber, and he says, "Dad," he says, "you got to get caught up in the times." Because I still have a lot of the old habits and old tools. And when I get done, I had a cube van. This was just 4 or 5 months ago. I decided to stop working. Took the truck, all my plumbing stuff, put it in the truck, brought it to this house, parked it in the yard, and he goes, "It's yours. I'm all done."
Now, in your business, did you do like all of the paperwork
Yep,
yourself?
everything was right here. You see that desk? You know where that desk came from? Newberry's. J.C. Newberry's. Newberry's on Main Street in Biddeford. You remember that? It was Fishman's, and then there was another store across the street, and then Newberry's. And they had a basement. This was down in the basement. And they was going out of business, and I was draining the place down, and I saw the desk, and I said, "What are you going to do with that desk?" I said, "We're going to throw it in the dump." "I'll take it." Brought it home. I've had it it's probably 100 years old.
So you did all the bookkeeping?
Everything myself, ran the work, ordered the materials, and I worked myself, and always did that. I was a hard worker. I thought I was a hard worker, and I was, I guess. And I was taught nothing about working 12, 16 hours a day. And that for a while there, I was just working to keep the crew going. Well, what am I doing this for? Of course, you got to pay so many insurance and Social Security and their pay and raises and vacations, and so all the money you made went to the help. So I don't need this. So I stopped quite a few years ago. Just worked myself. Worked up right until I was 80 years old. And the only reason I stopped is because my wife made me. You're not working anymore, because I have vertigo. So got to be careful with your balance and stuff like that. So I said, okay, I'll stop. So I stopped.
So I'm going to roll you back a little bit again. So other than going to those the racing as a teenager at that silver
skates,
and that took place at
the Boston Garden.
What did that feel like?
It's not there anymore. Well, we used to go down, and they'd have us. We'd start. It'd be a two-day event, and we would start like 9 o'clock in the morning, and race until 5 o'clock at night. Then at 5 o'clock at night, they clear everybody off the ice, make new ice. Then the Bruins would come on and play. So we got to watch the Bruins. Well, it's changed really a lot. Boston Garden's not there anymore, and we didn't skate in the new rink because that was after I got done skating, but it was quite a thing. I mean.
Now, had you been out of Biddeford? Did you travel much outside of Biddeford before that?
Nope. Our first out-of-state races was down to it was called the Silver Skates Derby, and it was the biggest race in New England. And that's where we started. From there, they had the Golden Skates at another rink in Boston, and then they started having races in Lynn, and then Wilmington and Worcester and places like that. And we just started going around now and then. Then once I got really into it and become one of the top skaters around in New England or eastern part of the United States, I started going to bigger meets all out west and California and different places like that.
Now, when you enlisted in the service and you went for your training in Texas,
Yep.
was that the first time you'd ever really been?
Yes, yes.
Did you find that a difficult transition?
Well, no, because you're living in barracks and so many guys in there. In the barracks, you probably have 70 guys in the barracks, and the bunks are this far apart, and you got a trunk at the base of the bottom of your bed, and that's all the stuff you had was in that trunk. And they have inspections every now and then, and you had to have your trunk. They had a specific way to head it. Towel here, face cloth, soap, underwear, socks, and on the bottom you kept your pants, and everything had to be so, and they'd have an inspection, and you had to have the place spotless, and your bed had to be perfect, no wrinkles on it or whatsoever. And they always said that they had to be able to take a dime and flip it, have it bounce off the bed, and if it landed flat and didn't move, the bed wasn't tight enough. So, and then we used to have guard duty for the barracks, and you had to stay up all night if you're on guard duty, standing by the door with a gun, nothing to do. And if you had to go to the bathroom, you had to wake somebody up. You want to take my duty while I go to the bathroom? Then somebody's standing there for you. And there was this lot. I mean, there was thousands of people there, and all the time I was down there, I never saw anybody I knew. And when I got ready to leave, I ran into a guy in the BX. I said, "You look familiar." He goes, "Yeah." He said, I don't remember his name. "I'm so-and-so." "Really? Where you from?" "Biddeford." "Really?" "Yeah, I lived on Oak Street." "Really? I lived right 50 feet from Oak Street." "Really?" And that was the only guy I ever saw all the time I was in the service. But I joined the service with a guy from Old Orchard Beach who was a phenomenal athlete. It was Bill Champagne, and he was really a super athlete for Old Orchard. But we didn't play Old Orchard in those days because that was a smaller school. We played Thornton. Some of my good friends were Brad Leach, Freddie West, a bunch of guys like that I grew up with. They lived in Biddeford, then they moved to Saco. So, but Brad Leach was one of the phenomenal athletes in the state. He was the athletic director over there and taught there for years and years. And when I played there, the football field was across the street where Toby's used to be. Remember Toby's? Now it's Amato's, I believe. Yeah, but that field used to be right there. And we used to have to change over in the barn, put our football stuff on the barn, and then walk down, cross Route 1. The cops would be there, stop the traffic, cross Route 1 onto the field. That was something else. And then at halftime, we had to go back across the street to the barn. You know, they give the pep talk and all that stuff. But then we wasn't a very powerful school. We played Thornton Academy. At the halftime, it was 7-7, and I scored the only touchdown. At the end of the game, I think it was 44-7. Because we didn't have any reserves. That's when Brad Leach and all those guys were top athletes. And we didn't have any reserves, so we just wore down. And we had so many guys taken to the hospital. It got to the point is, okay, you're going to go in. I don't want to go in. I didn't get hurt in the game, but I know it was at least 6 guys I know they took to the hospital because they was so much bigger and stronger and had better training than we did, you know. Our coach was Pete Mantis. I don't know if you know Pete Mantis or not. His sister used to own Truman's Market, the Trumases. Went from Trumases to Truman. The Truman Driving School, that was them, the family them. Most of them are gone now, but a few of them are still around. But things change so much, it's hard to keep track of it and remember it all.
Now, when you were in the service, what was going on militarily at that time?
It was during peacetime, and just before I was getting ready to get discharged, they was going to give me a 6 months early out. Well, that was during the Cuban crisis. I was due to get discharged, couldn't get discharged because of that. So we had to stay in for the full 4 years. By then, the conflict blew over and they let us out. That was the only thing that was really happening when I was in the service.
Now you were there for, is it 3 or 4 years? 4 years.
4 years.
Said. Yep. Now, what did you have for duty?
For duty, I worked in the electronic squadron in the base orderly room. That's because I was only there a few months a year. They didn't want me to, because I was kind of out of it a little bit. So that's what I did. I worked in the orderly room and I did the base newspaper and all the paperwork that went along with the squadron.
So how did they make the connection to have you spend time doing speed skating while you were in the service?
Well, I was in, and I met this guy. His name was Wilson. He was from Saranac Lake, New York, but he was stationed in Texas. And I happened to run into him one day, and we got talking about skating. He says, "Oh, you ought to let him know it's your skate." So I did. I went to the base administrative office and told him what the story was. And, "Oh, fill out this paperwork, give us a summary of what you've done and all that stuff." And there I was on the Air Force skating team, flying around all over the place skating. And we used to get hops. I've ridden in some of the planes you wouldn't believe. Boxcars, what they call boxcar planes, where they used to bring equipment in with no seats in it, just a bench. Sit on the bench and the plane. That's how we got around base to base. I used to get a hop to go from Plattsburgh Air Force Base to, say, St. Paul, Minnesota, fly out there and then get out there and hitchhike to the race. It was something else. I mean, people wouldn't do that nowadays, but
And this was competition between,
United States and Canada.
okay, but different United
Oh, yeah.
States bases?
No,
against
no,
each
no.
other? Oh, you
no.
represented the
Yeah.
United States.
I was on Air Force. There was only 3 of us on the Air Force skating team. Period.
Okay.
That was it. And it was competition was for anybody in the United States or Canada. They called it the North Americans Championships, and every meet was, one meet might be Minnesota, the other one might be in Pennsylvania, and just meet to meet to meet. Most times there was one break in between the meet, so it'd be 2 weeks, so you give you a chance to get back and recuperate before you went to to a meet.
Now, you were able to do this kind of like full time.
Yep. That's the only reason I went as far as I did. If it would have been for that, I never would have left Biddeford. Well, except for a couple of races in Boston. But yeah, I wouldn't be been able to afford it. It's very expensive. I mean, and when you going out there, well, at first I used to drive out there in my car and sleep in the car. But then after we got sponsored by the service, they used to pay our way, so we used to fly out there.
What was your most memorable meet when you were part of that particular group?
Oh, let's see. Probably the North American Championships in Minnesota. Yeah, to me, that was the main meet where I did the best in. I won the meet, and that was one of the fewer meets that I won because went on a point system. And of course, these guys they had clubs and organizations and all. In fact, when I was in Plattsburgh, they had a Plattsburgh speed skating team, club they called it, and I got involved with them, and I started teaching their kids how to skate. They were mostly younger kids. I think the oldest one was 18, but I was in the service. I was a little older. Taught them, and I started going to meets with them, and they would bring me with their cars or wherever we went, by bus or whatever. Didn't have to pay. So when not a good thing to say, but the service used to pay me too. So I went with them for free and got paid by the service for going. So it was a big deal. Wow, I'm got it made here. So it was tough at times, but overall it's a real good experience.
Now, this was a recognized sport in the Olympics at the time.
Still is.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So is that anything that you had that in your sights?
I went to Olympic training camp, and it was picking 8 skaters out of the whole the whole United States, and I was like in 10th spot. Couldn't quite make it because I didn't have the right kind of skates. I didn't have Olympic skates. Olympic skates are longer and they glide better, shorter cup. So I couldn't quite compete with all the top skaters in the country because my legs were short. And in those days, the only Olympic event they had was Olympic style skating, which was a big track, and you only raced against the clock. And I was used to racing in a group. So I didn't quite make the team because I didn't have the right skates and didn't have the right training, but I was fast enough to compete with them, but not good enough to make the team. So from there, I just started skating all over the place. I learned a lot in the service, an awful lot. Yeah, it was good. I think everybody should go into service, even nowadays. Even if it's for 6 months or 9 months, they should have to serve their time, get away from your family, your friends, and you don't know anybody, you're on your own.
What's the biggest thing you got out of it?
Being independent. You learn to be independent. There's nobody there that's going to take care of me. Nobody there's going to do anything for me. You got to do everything yourself. And that's the way it was.
So then you left there and came back to Biddeford. Did you think about going someplace else where you had...
No, I was married at the time.
Okay.
But I got married the fourth year I was in the service. And no, I was married and had a kid. So came back here and stayed here. There was no work. So like I said, went to couple different industries and ended up working for Lamontagne.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for him for 8 years and then I went to the union.
And then you found a way in your spare time to still continue some skating.
Well, that's how I got my first job. It's because I ran the club, taught his kids how to skate, and because of his kids, he gave me a job. And the job just flourished into what I am today. Not all of him, but,
Mm-hmm.
Being in the union was a different kind of work because it was all industrial work. Big pipe, Some of the pipe was so big, we welded the pipe from inside. 6-7 foot high pipes, stainless steel pipes, and on step ladders, you're welding around. It was quite an experience. Nuclear pipe fitting is very, very particular, very much so. Everything you do, even when you bring two pipes together and you tack it, just a tack, to hold it in place, they had to x-ray that before you welded it. And then every pass you would do, they would x-ray it. And they found one little piece of porosity, which is probably part of the rod. One little speck in there. The pipe was this thick now. Had to grind it out at a bevel like this, all angled down to where the porosity was. Then you remove that, and then you had to weld it back up again. So it was quite a process. One joint would take you 4 or 5 weeks to do one single joint.
But you managed to find a way to still engage in your passion.
Yeah.
So how did you go about starting that club?
Well, it started out, it was just a Sunday race. And then I got a little more into it. And once I started going to the garden 1 to 2 times, then all the kids were all interested in going down there. Wow, I'd like to go down there. So first year we went down, we took a group of, I think it was 6 or 8 kids. Then at the end, we had a group of maybe 20 kids. Of course, we had to cut them all down there and take care of them, bring them back. So that's pretty much how I got into it and stayed into it because of the kids.
So
to this day, all those kids that I taught how to skate and skated with me are my best of friends. Never forgot it. They always say, that was the best time of my life, is when we were skating together. All of them. Some of them live very close by here. Doris Rokery lives right over Cross Street here. And Lamontagne lived down by the field. And they're all around here. So
I was going to ask you, between when you were competing yourself versus teaching others, how do those two compare?
it always went together. I was skated and taught at the same time. So it wasn't a matter of just teaching and then stop skating and teach. It was a teaching and competing. And I competed right up until I got out of the service. And after I got out of the service, I did a little bit of competing, but after a while, you say, well, I got to stop sometime. I'm getting older here. And got to support a family, so I stopped skating after, I think, 20 years of skating, a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into something else, and racquetball and this and that.
So did you hand it over to somebody else when
Nope.
you stopped
Nope,
it?
the
or-
club, after I got done, the club just folded. They did away with the St. Louis skating ring, so that kind of put a damper in it, and the only thing was Westbrook skating ring. And by then, the Laverias had let it go, and it was, I don't know, it was some organization bought it. I don't know if it was St. Louis Alumni or one organization bought it anyways. Or maybe it was Masonic. Yeah, it was Masonic. And they didn't really promote it. The ice wasn't good. The building wasn't good, so it kind of petered out. So,
Mm-hmm.
like all good things, it comes to an end after time.
Did it ever come back between then and now?
No, not really. No, never did. No. There was some other clubs from up Maine that started in, but I think there's still one club up around Augusta. They compete in different all over the country. And that's the only club that I know of around this area, except for around the Boston area. But it's a type of sport. It's gone away. It's like most sports, fades out, except for football, basketball, baseball. That'll always be here.
And racquetball, why did you pick that?
Well, I was running at the time, competing in races, and my wife, Kathy, got me a membership over there. Well, all right, I'll go and try it. So I went over there just to really work out, and I saw the course. Wow, that looks pretty cool. So I started playing a little bit. But by then I was kind of in my, I don't know, 40s or 50s, up around there. I started competing, and I got better and better, and then I started playing tournaments and winning state championships, and the first thing I know I was running the club, and I was the club pro, and just kept snowballing, So from that, racquetball was my second best passion. I love that. And I like bike racing. I like that. And I love playing pool. I have a lot of trophies for pool and stuff like that. And you like pool. Like you think pool, it's a table and you play. Well, there's more to it than that. I mean, the stick I got, it cost me $1,800 for the stick, just for a pool stick. Of course, it comes with two-piece, and they got a spare shaft and all this stuff, and it's balanced and got ivory on it, and it's like anything else. When you really get into it, it's a whole different ball game. Like the kids that play football around here. See, some of these kids around here are really good football players, but you compare them with a team from Massachusetts or New York or Texas, they won't even make the team. Period. I've seen it a lot. Different, and all sports are that way. Being from a state like Maine, things are not up to date like the sports are.
So how do you feel about, what's it mean to you to come from Biddeford?
Well, I don't know. I've always lived here. I always liked people here. People are friendly. I always enjoyed living in Biddeford, except for the years I lived in New York. And people aren't as friendly there as they are here. Of course, around here, everybody knew me. Everybody. Over there, well, you're just another one of the club. And, they knew who you were, but they didn't know you. And that was the difference between living there and living in Maine. People around here knew you. They didn't know what you was. They knew who you were. That was the difference, I think.
And you've won too many to list in terms of different awards and recognitions. What are your top 2 or 3 that mean the most to you?
Oh, let me see. Well, I think one of them was racquetball. I did pretty good in racquetball. And road racing, running. I did pretty well in that. I won a lot of races. And of course, that has really blossomed compared to what it was years ago. We used to have a race around here. One of the main races in those days was the Dog Tavern race. And they used to when they first started out, there'd be 75, 100 people, but now they're in the hundreds of people, like the Kerrigan pub race. Years ago, there's a starting line and a couple rows of people and you were gone. Nowadays, it's 15, 20 rows of people, it's all ages, and people compete nowadays to a much older age than they used to. I used to be considered the old man of almost everything I did because I was older than most kids, but I competed and stayed with them, and no problem. You know the difference when you go to a meet like a racquetball tournament. You start out with the trials, and you might have 30 guys in your group, and they got a pyramid, and you work your way down to the semifinals and then the finals, and the time you got to the finals, you was exhausted. You had to play so many tournaments, and of course by then the level rised up, so you had to play really good. So a lot of nice people. Met so many nice people in my life. It's just unbelievable. A lot of them. I look at the trophy and they go like, I don't even remember where I got half of them. Of course, this is only a part of what I used to have. Through the years, I had a trophy case with about 50, 60 trophies on it. And my brother knocked it over. They all broke. Throw them away. Throw them away. Like I had the ones on the floor, mostly broken ones. But they're still trophies, so they mean something to me. Most of them I remember where they come from, but a lot of them I don't.
Now, are you still competing in anything at all?
No.
No? Road racing?
No.
Or, no?
Well, I developed too many problems with neuropathy, my feet. That's the worst thing. Out of all the things that I have wrong with me, the thing, if I could cure anything, would be my head. That's the main thing, because very unsteady. That's why I don't do too much nowadays. I mean, I worked up until 80, but as far as sports, no, I stopped. I did bike racing up until 3-4 years ago. I used to have the race up in Kennebunkport, Portland, Bath, and had races different places. And that has changed. I mean, you used to go to a bike race, and you'd had 50 people. Now you go to a bike race and you get 1,500 people. Like I used to run up, when I was running, we had a place at Sugarloaf, running one day. And I see this woman running. Boy, she looks familiar. So I ran by her, didn't think anything of it. And then they had a skating rink up there. Now, one day I was down there skating around, going around. And when I get on the ice, everybody seems to get off the ice. So I'm skating around by myself on the ice. And this woman's on the side, she's talking to Kathy. Who is that guy? Oh, that's Dan Gagne. He used to be a speed skater. Really? I'd like to meet him. So I go and meet him. Hi, my name is Joan Benoit. Do you run? Yeah, I've run by you many times. Or you run by me, put it that way. She's a good athlete. She's done a lot of good. A lot of good, yeah.
So tell me about a little bit about your family.
My family? My 3 daughters, they got into sports a little bit, but not too much. But they always went to my meet and stuff like that. But my second marriage, we had a son, and he is quite an athlete. I mean, that's him over there. Top athlete for Biddeford, top national ranked racquetball player, tennis player, super golfer, doesn't run. Doesn't like to run. You're crazy, Dad. You don't want to run. That's what I do. But no, my family. But some of my grandkids have become good athletes. They're all runners, stuff like that. So they were high school athletes and gymnastics and stuff like that. So, but none of them really got into it except for my son, got into it like I did.
Now, what's his first name?
Nathan. We call him Nate. Nathan Gagne. And he's got two little kids, a little girl, a little boy, and his little girl is unbelievable. She has the mind of her. She's 2 years old. She talks as good as I do, or maybe better. She's athletic. She rolls around and jumps. 2 years old. Has all her teeth, all her hair. 2 years old. She bosses her brother around. He's 3.5. Pushes him around. She's strong as an ox. She's unbelievable. We go, oh boy, I wouldn't want to be her date.
So what kinds of changes have you seen in Biddeford through the years?
Well, the town physically hasn't changed that much. It's gone from a local textile community into a spread out community that people work in Portland, Boston. Nothing to meet a guy that's living next to you works in Boston. Nothing to it. I have grandkids that work in Boston, live up here. The stores, all the stores, downtown used to be a bustling place. There was no shopping centers and stuff like that. Everything was done downtown. So you went downtown, it was like walking at the mall on Main Street in Biddeford. And every store, Polakowicz's and different stores, Murphy's Music Store, they're all gone now. The Green Shoe Store, now they're all restaurants. And I see where it's changing into like the old port area. We went out to eat in a little shop a while back and talking to people, how you talk to people next to your table. Oh yeah, we come down from Portland because we heard of what the great food is down here. And really? From Portland? Oh. And people from Boston they come up, they live in Portland or Cape Elizabeth, they come down here to eat. I mean, like we used to do in the old port area, go down there and eat in the old port area. So, in fact, the old port area, I did probably 10 buildings down there, plumbing and heating in those big buildings years ago. It was quite a thing then. But it's changed in there, changed here. The people have changed. All the older people are disappearing. A lot of people are. We have a group. We've been doing this now for about 8 or 10 years. We meet every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. And we used to meet at McDonald's. And we used to take the big table in the center, in the corner, where we fall in a couple of chairs, and we sit there from 6 to 8 every day. 8 o'clock, get up and leave. Well, we stayed there up until the time where they got a new manager and he put a sign up there. No more than 30 minutes, maximum. Okay. Heck with you guys. We went to Burger King across the street. And over there, they welcomed us with open arms. And there's nothing with them to give us a free coffee. And we still do the same thing over there. Up until this past Monday. I went over there and closed.
Yeah, that's a good, a lot of the times when we do these interviews, we ask people to share their personal observations of, major historical events. And right now we're at the beginning of something that I think will go down in the history books as a major historical event with this global pandemic. So tell me about your thoughts about now that you're right in the middle of it.
Well, I've never seen anything like it in my life. Even all the conflicts we've had, the wars, this is probably the worst thing that has ever happened to this country in the history of this country. And it's just beginning. People have changed, houses have changed, businesses have changed. Years ago, this house here, I probably did this house when they built it. And we moved from over, but we used to live over by the high school on Westmore Avenue at the very end. My house was at the end, and you went in the driveway and around into the woods. That's where my house was. Big 3-bedroom house, and a couple of bathrooms, and living room, dining room, kitchen, all this stuff. And so last year we decided, we got to downsize. So we bought this place. We were still living there, and we couldn't sell our other house over there. For some reason, I don't know why. We had a realtor. I won't say who the realtor was, but we had 2 showings in 6 months. 2 showings. And one of the showings was an old woman, probably 75 years old, couldn't get up the stairs to get in the house. And the other one was an older woman, too much land to take care of. That was it. So we swapped realtors from that realtor to a friend of mine who's a realtor in Kennebunk Port. His name is Joey Radford, and sold our house in 2 weeks. Sold it, gone. Now we had owned this for over a year. People must have been wondering, well, what are they doing? Why would somebody buy a house and not move in it? So actually, we've only been here for a short while. So we put a lot of money into this house, but we paid good money for it. But that's what we wanted. The only thing I don't like about this house is it's got a one-car garage. Don't like that.
So what about what's happening with the coronavirus? How are you seeing?
I haven't left the house because of my age. They say if you're elderly, and I am elderly, stay home. So the only time I leave the house is when I go for a walk, and I walk 3-4 miles almost every day. That's the only time I leave the house. But like my daughter called me up, how you doing? Oh, fine. So she come over this morning, bought me some face masks because you can't find them. So she bought me a couple. But never thought it would ever come to that in this country, because we're so advanced compared to other countries. And I just can't believe that it's happening. You go out somewhere and everything, there's no traffic, there's nobody on the streets, everything's closed. The only thing open is takeouts. Never thought it'd come to that, but here we are, right in the middle of it. Hopefully they'll look it, I hope. Not that I'm worried. I mean, that's one thing. I'm not afraid to die. I've been so many close calls from death in my life that dying doesn't mean, if I died tomorrow, it wouldn't bother me. It wouldn't bother me because I'd be dead. But, I mean, I'm not afraid to die. A lot of people, I did this doctor and that doctor. And I do have a lot of doctors, though, because I have a lot of problems. But it doesn't bother me in the least. They always say, do this, do that, take this. Medications, I don't know, I probably know, 6 or 7 different medications. That's changed from years back. You didn't get much medication years back. I remember when I was a kid, the doctors used to go and make house calls. Our doctor was Dr. O'Sullivan, who was one of the well-known doctors in Biddeford here. He was our doctor. House calls, get sick, come over and check it, take your temperature, blah, blah, take this pill, and you leave. That would be it. Nowadays, you can't even get a doctor. You got to go to outpatient, and if you go to outpatient, it's 2-3 hour wait or longer. So that's changed a lot too.
What is one thing you'd want to make sure that people take away from hearing your story?
Well, I think staying healthy and staying active. And people, how do you do what you do at your age? It's easy. I never stopped. I always was active. Always. Right now I'm not too active, but I wish I could be, but I can't. But that's what I would tell people. Stay active, stay involved in your community, and have a lot of friends. That's what I say.
And I've asked you a lot of questions. Is there anything else that you had thought that you wanted to share that maybe just didn't come up because I didn't ask the right question?
No, not really. I don't know. I just think people should stay involved and stay in contact with their friends and family. And you don't see that nowadays because people move away and you don't see them. And I think that's very important, to have a lot of friends and a lot of relatives and stay close to them. Because I know a lot of people have relatives, I haven't seen him in 15 years or 20 years. No, that shouldn't be that way. You should stay in contact, Like we have, my family, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, we always have a get-together. Everybody in their family gets together in one house. Sometimes we'll have 40 people. Everybody eats at the same time to set up temporary tables, and everybody brings something, and everybody has their special dish. Like Kathy, she makes pies, all kinds of pies and stuff like that. She's a great cook. That's what I say. Just stay in contact with people and enjoy them. That's what I say.
Okay. Well, I thank you very much for taking all this time to share your story.
Well, it's good to reminisce. You know, you forget a lot of things that happened to you in the past unless somebody brings it up. You know what I mean? And that's nice to reminisce like that, because you forget about a lot of stuff. And when you ask a question, oh, I remember that. Yeah. So, very good interview. I thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.